Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and welcome. I have the pleasure of inviting you all, or welcoming you all, to the SB 56 side event on the transition to the Enhanced Transparency Framework under the Paris Agreement, an update on key developments. And I'd like to warmly welcome all of you who are here in the room, as well as those of you who are joining online. My name is Karen Simonson. I'm a program officer with the Enhanced Transparency Framework Coordination Unit within the Transparency Division at the UNFCCC Secretariat, and I'll be moderating today's session. We have a lot of information to go through today, so I'll try not to take long. We'd like to get started, and we'd also like to have a chance at the end of this session for you to ask questions and share your comments. Very briefly, the objective of today's session is essentially twofold. We'd like to give you an update on the key transparency-related outcomes from Glasgow, and we'd also like to give a bit of a look ahead to the main tasks, deliverables, and timelines that are involved with implementing the ETF and the transition from the existing MRV arrangements under the Convention and its Kyoto Protocol. I'd like to turn now to the Director of the Transparency Division, Mr. Donald Cooper, to provide some opening remarks. Don, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Karen. I will choose to ignore your hint. They always, just before they introduce me, say, we have a lot to cover in a very short period of time, as if I take up a lot of time talking. I enjoy talking, and believe me, it's the number one tool that everyone in this room has. Boy, can we talk. Fortunately, we also know how to get to the end and start the next conversation. And in Glasgow, all we did was get to the end. We got to the end of virtually everything, and then started the next conversation. So, we have the ETF set in a position where we can all begin to implement it on the timelines that you put in place. In order to do that, the processes, procedures, systems, tools, experts, training, engagement, capacity building, all these things have to happen in order for all parties on the timelines they set, or even earlier, are able to engage. We, as of today, are on schedule for the timeline set by the parties for the Enhanced Transparency Framework to be functional for parties. Now, if I am asked that in 2 months' time, I hope I will still be able to say we are on schedule. Right? But at some point in time, things might come up that are difficult to address, but so far, that has not happened. We have been reliably informed by parties that they will continue to support the development activities, so we are comfortable that the resources will be available. We are comfortable that when we start engagement with parties to ensure that their input is guiding the process, that they will be available to us. And we are also comfortable that the parties who want to engage in capacity building during that engagement phase are also interacting with us and through the CGE in order to be able to do that. So all of those bits and pieces are happening. And during the course of the rest of our meeting today, you will get information and updates from each of those persons who are leading those aspects so that you can see where we are and what the next stages will be. I want to touch on one further topic. There is this belief amongst some individuals, entities, parties, stakeholders, that the Enhanced Transparency Framework is the submission of a biennial transparency report every 2 years to meet your commitment under the Paris Agreement. We ask you to consider in your dialogue that this could not be further from the truth. Yes, the end product is the submission of the BTR, which reflects all of the things that you have agreed should be reflected. But the key is that that party was in a position to submit that BTR. In order to do so, they had to have an understanding of their development pathway. Which sectors are critical to them? Which are their resilience needs? Where are their markets that they can exploit? Which industry, institutions, do they need to move further from the coast? How are they going to face risks from climate disasters? They have to understand these things, right, in order to be able to submit the BTR. So when a party makes that submission, one has to look back at that long trail of things that put them in that position. So we are very pleased to work with all of the Secretariat in ensuring that every party, regardless of where they start from, end up where they can say, here is my BTR. It is the best one I can do, regardless of how bad it is. And I remember being in St. Lucia with a CGE representative from Germany. And parties were discussing the BURs that they were submitting and how difficult it was to find a consultant who can produce for them a quality of BUR similar to the BRs submitted by the developed countries. And I remember this German lady saying, if you want to have a standard to compare to, you should have a look at Germany's first submission that it did, especially the one with its GHG inventories. It was terrible. They had no clue. But it was the first one. It was the best one that they could do. And then over the period of 25 odd years, they've gotten good at it. So over the next 25 years, hopefully you'll get good at it too. But to assume that you will start at the point where somebody has been working at it for over 20 years is just too much. So we encourage you to ensure that you are always submitting the best that you can, right, and not the best that you can buy. So with that, I turn back to Karen and apologize for taking up too much of your time. Not really, I enjoyed it. So it's nice to engage with you. So back to you, Karen.
Thank you, Don. I'll turn now to Shuhong Wang, who is the manager of one of the subdivisions here within the Transparency Division. The floor is yours. Thank you, Shuhong.
Thank you, Karen. And good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome to Bonn. Welcome to this side event. As Karen introduced, thank you. My name is Xuehong Wang, and I'm managing the Reporting and Review subdivision in the Transparency Division. So today, actually, before we zoom into the specific aspects of ETF operationalization and implementation, I would like to, first of all, provide an overview of where we are. And this involves, the key outcomes from Glasgow and what have happened since Glasgow over the past half a year. And when we talk about ETF operationalization and implementation, we're really looking at two key aspects. One is really to look at the new infrastructure, system, tools in place. The other aspect is the support to developing country parties to make that transition from the existing MRV to the enhanced transparency framework. So I will start from the key outcomes from from Glasgow. So as you may recall, I'm sure many of you are well aware of, in Glasgow there were two key work streams. One is really to look at the operational guidance on the MPGs, modalities, procedure, and guidelines for the ETF. The other key work stream is on the support to developing country parties in ETF implementation. So on the first work stream, the operational guidance on MPGs, parties adopted 3 sets of common tables and tabular formats. So these 3 sets of tables and formats include those for GHG inventory reporting on NDC progress in implementing and achieving NDCs, as well as FTC support provided and mobilized, as well as support received and needed. In addition, parties adopted the outlines for annual transparency reports, for the review reports, as well as for national inventory documents. Parties also adopted the new training program under the ETF for review experts. In addition, there were also mandates from Glasgow on concrete activities and deliverables to ensure ETF operationalization and implementation. On the support side, this is the other work stream, key work stream from Glasgow. Parties, they completed the TOR of the CGE, amended the CGE membership. Parties provided comprehensive guidance to the GEF to look at ways to increase its support to ETF under the 8th replenishment of resources for the GEF to improve the efficiency in its process, procedures, and delivery of support. Parties also established a new agenda under the CMA to look at support for ETF, and the discussions on this new agenda item will start later this year at COP27. So here is the overview of the implementation of this new ETF package. So as you can see on this slide, it involves a few key aspects. So the implementation of the package actually already has been launched by the Secretariat immediately after COP26. First of all, the Secretariat has actively engaged with parties and other stakeholders to communicate and promote the transparency outcome from Glasgow. Through these engagement activities, we are seeking support by all involved and also understand better the needs of parties in implementing the ETF. Secretariat also has started to develop detailed implementation plans for all these key aspects of ETF operationalization and implementation work. The Secretariat started the development of ETF reporting and review tools and procedures, as well as ETF training program and how to conduct the first round of ETF reviews. And later on, my colleagues will provide more details looking at each of these aspects. Secretariat also, one of the key aspects of our work since COP26 is to scale up our efforts to encourage developing country parties to actively engage in transition to the ETF, including accessing funds from the GEF as soon as possible, and also accelerated the technical support to developing country parties through the work of the CGE, for instance. One very important aspect is to mobilize all the needed or necessary resources that we need to implement the new system, new ETF. These are both financial resources and human resources, and in this regard, I really call on the support by all parties. To provide, it's key to provide to get these necessary resources available to ensure the timely deliverables. My colleagues will further elaborate on these aspects. Very quickly, Yeah. Very quickly to look at the key milestones and deliverables, what we have already done. So in the next few slides, I'll take you through the next 4 years, from 2022 this year until 2025. So on the slides, you will see the key milestones. So as I mentioned just now, Secretariat already initiated the development of the new Etf training program. In March this year, we have already had our first meeting with the CGE and lead reviewers to get their guidance on the key elements of this new training program. And following their guidance, Secretariat has already started developing the training materials following the decision from Glasgow. Secretariat also initiated development of the reporting software, and we will provide more information soon after my presentation. Also, Secretariat started the development of the new business process and procedures for ETF review practice. The CGE membership has been updated, as you may well know. So in June, now, during SB session, you know that SBSTA initiated this new ETF agenda item, which is voluntary review of adaptation information. The discussions are ongoing. We will also, what's going to happen in June, Secretariat will share the first draft of the ETF training materials to lead reviewers and CGE for their comments. So that's the plan. So for the lead reviewers and CGE members who are here in the room, you will expect to receive the training materials very soon. In November at COP27, and SBSTA 57 there will be a report to SBSTA on the progress with regards to the reporting tools, with regard to the ETF training program. And as I mentioned earlier, the new agenda item under CMA will also be initiated. Discussion will start on the provision of financial and technical support to developing country parties for reporting and capacity building. Next year, in March next year, following the timeline agreed in Glasgow, the overview, the ETF training module, the overview module will be available, and we will soon roll out training using that new overview module. In June next year, the test version of the reporting software will be available, and after that, regular training will be provided to parties to demonstrate the functions of this new reporting software. In September next year, according to the timeline, all the training materials, because just now I mentioned in March, the overview module will be available. And then in September, the other 3 modules, including the NDC progress in implementing and achieving NDCs, FTC, as well as the GHG. So the other 3 training modules will all be available. And then following the release of these new training materials, the training activities can be fully launched. In December next year, according to the decision from Glasgow, parties will share their views on experience with a test version of the reporting tools. So this is just a reminder. This is from Glasgow decision. And of course, the other thing I would like to mention is with regards to possible additional training material on adaptation, this is an ongoing discussion. This is under the agenda item that I mentioned just now on voluntary review of adaptation information. So I have 2 slides. So this is 2024. We are already in 2024, 2 years from now. 2024 June session, the final, by June 2024, according to a Glasgow decision, the final version of the reporting tools will be released, will be released. And of course, the final version of the user manuals for reporting tools will also be available. Following that, the plan is to organize regular trainings of these reporting tools. And of course, at the SB session in 2024, there will be a status report to SAPSTA if the tools and training programs are not finished. So there will be stock taking at that stage. In November, by the end of 2024, there will be a report being prepared on how comments on the test version of the reporting tools were considered for the final version. And also in the second half of 2024, depending on the submission of the first BTR, the review activities will be launched also in the second half of 2024. This is my last slide. So looking at 2025, if the review reports, the first bunch of the review reports, of the ETF review reports, if they are already published, then we will plan for the facilitative multilateral consideration of progress, this new multilateral consideration process, for those parties that have already been reviewed under the ETF. And of course, there will be additional sessions, continuous sessions on this FMCP, this new process, for those parties that have already been completing their technical reviews in the first half of 2025. And one last piece of information, in December 2025, according to the mandate from Glasgow, the interactive web portal for FTC information will be available. So that's the overall plan. And as you see, there are lots of activities. And one very important thing that will going through from 2022 to 2025, looking at the timeline that I provided, support to developing country parties. Of course, this is so important. This is ongoing. And later on, my colleague Tuba will provide more information on that. So with that, I will hand over to Vlad to present on the reporting software. Over to you.
Vlad, if I may, just before you begin, I noticed that some of you are taking photos. I'd like to assure you all that the presentation will be available after the session, and we will post it online on our website. Our website is also available on the final slide of the presentation. So please don't worry that you won't have access to the presentation. We will make it accessible. Thank you. Vlad, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karen, and thank you, Shuhong. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Vlad Tushke, and I'm the team lead for the systems and tools in the transparency division. I will show you a little bit in the next 2-3 slides on what is going on with the tools. You have already seen that we have received this mandate from Glasgow in building up the tools. Just before showing you the timelines and a bit of the architecture, just to point out some of the fundamentals and the introduction, the key issues in building these tools. First of all, it is important to tell you that, of course, we will be guided by the mandates received in Glasgow and before. So we are looking at the decisions. Based on these decisions, we are working on the business requirements, and then further on IT system requirements for building up these tools. Then one of the ideas in building up these tools is to make sure that they are simple. Now we are talking about tools that will be used by 200 parties almost, that are having different circumstances, different starting points. Some of them require flexibility, support. The resources in many countries are limited. So one of the main points in our working on this project is to make sure that the tools are simple and will be easy to use by experts working in different institutions. Then the idea of flexibility that was embedded in the decisions in Glasgow, the same flexibility will be embedded also in the tools. And again, the idea on building up and enhancing of what is already happening. So we are not starting something from scratch. We have already 15 years in some cases, less years in other cases of experience. Not us, but you, the parties, together also with the Secretariat, in reporting emissions, in reporting policies and measures, financial data, and so on. So the new tools will also consider this huge amount of experience that was gathered in the last years. Now, to show you a little bit of the timeline now, and this is only for 2020. We will come back to this kind of gatherings during the COP in Sharm el-Sheikh and further on. We are just showing you the initial phase of the project development, starting now to look more into the implementation phase. But I'm not going to read the things on the slide, just to point out that the first part of this year is focusing on the preparations for this project. This is a huge project. We are talking about 3 tools for parties to report emissions, to report their NDC progress, which means policies and measures, projections, structure summary, and so on. So, and the third one on the financial information. So this is a huge project. This is a project that in the end will provide tools for the parties to report on the Paris Agreement in the next, 10, 15, 20 years. So this is why it is important to set sufficient time in the initial phase of this project to take into consideration all the business requirements. Just for you to have an idea, we have reached somewhere around plus 550 business requirements for these 3 tools. These business requirements need to be transformed into system requirements, which is what the IT people need to read without us explaining on every business requirements what is the respective tool needs to do. So this is the process that is going on now. We have some consultants working with us. We have managed to set up this project already. It is ongoing. As mentioned by our director, the process is in time, as you can also see on the slide, and we are coming closer and closer to finding or looking for the vendors and setting up the contracts for the IT companies to start working on the real development, IT development of these tools. The first thing that we will need to officially come back to parties is during the Substa in Sharm el-Sheikh, where we will need to provide a report of the progress in this project, and we hope that by then we will have more information to share with you. I won't stay long on of what is going on. I just wanted to show you a little bit of how the architecture looks in terms of these tools. We are looking from top left, where the parties are, or on the top middle left part of the slide, where we see that for the enhanced transparency framework submission, there will be first something that I forgot to mention, the idea that the IPCC software will be made sure that there is this interoperability between the IPCC software with our reporting software, so that it will be made easier for parties to take their data coming out of their IPCC software and move it into our reporting software. From there, of course, we have the 3 tools that you see also on the left side of the slide, the CRT reporter, the CTF1 and CTF2. We just call them that to be simple. The first common tabular formats are on the NDC progress. The second common tabular formats are on the finance data, so that there is a separation now, which was not happening in the past, but now we have decided that it will be simple to have 3 separate tools. Of course, they will be connected in the backend. They will have the same touch and feel. That's one of our goals, to make sure that it is simple again to use them. And then through the submission portal of the Secretariat, the submissions will be able to be provided to the UNFCCC portal. And at the same time, the data will be included into our data warehouse that you see on the top, on the bottom of the slide, from where we will be using the data to provide review tools and communication tools that will be needed for the reviews. Again, that part of is not part of the initial project. This is part of the second phase of our project, but the idea of the entire architecture needs to consider that the respective data will be available for review tools to be used in the reviews. I don't think that I have much additions now. I know that the time is quite short, so open for questions when the time comes. Thank you.
Thank you, Vlad. And just to confirm, we will have time for questions at the end, so if you can kindly hold your questions until then. And I'll turn the floor now to Vitor, who will give us an update from the GHG inventory unit. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Actually, it will be myself and Ruta. So my name is Vitor Goes. I'm team lead of the GHG inventory unit of Transparency Division. And then on my side, we have Ruta Bumniene. She's the team lead of the IRR unit. So we can move to the next slide. And this next slide is a snapshot and identifies the five major relevant areas that you can see it from here. The main relevant areas that we consider that needs development to ensure that the review process is ready for when the ETF comes. And so this is an area that Transparency Division, as Shuhong mentioned already, that is working and in those work streams. And then I'll tell more about the plans later on. So let's start maybe with on the left. Yes. On the left, we have the shuttling of the technical expert reviews. And this has to do what is here to be discussed is when the reviews takes place. And we have the date of the submissions of the BTR, which is no later than the last day of 2024. And then we have on this paragraph 162, we have the specific guidance, the guidance how the steps of the review will take place, and this will be in the last slide of this part. You can see that there, and so what we need to know is there's some level of unknown on the submissions of the BTRs. First, for developed countries, there is also the submissions of GHG inventory in 15 April of each year. And then the deadline for the BTR is the last year. So it may be that the BTRs arrive in sequence, not all at the same time. And then we thought that maybe the most realistic approach would be to take those into batches, like we currently do for the technical analysis of the BWAR. So then will be a batch or a stagger, and this will be taken along the year 2024 and 2025, and so on. The second one is the review procedures, and this is one step down. And this is how we organize the review for a given review. I mean, what will be the steps and in more details, and what actions, what will be the roles of the different actors that the MPG mentions to be part of the review. One of the topics here is when identifications of in-country reviews, centralized reviews, desk reviews. And this is something that there's guidance in the MPGs, but maybe we also need to interpret that guidance and see how this is going to work. And the other fact is also, I mentioned already that the submissions of GHG inventories in 15 April. So, and then there's a large volume of materials to consider to the review, and we need large reviews. That's the next topic. But this we may need to maybe consider the staggered approaches for the review. This is something that we still exploring, and of course this then will be presented. And finally, in that area, after all is planned, then we need to develop the necessary non-IT tools. This could be the review practice guidance, review handbooks, or templates, templates is quite an important element, and this also needs to be developed. Finally, for the middle element is the compositions of the TERTs, the technical expert review teams, and of course that's an area that also Ruta will cover in the next slide. Is that we need more? We have more. I mean, in comparison, we have the TERTs have a significant amount of tasks for the review of the BTR, and also there will be larger number of parties to be reviewed in each biennium. So this has to do how to ensure that we meet the requirements in terms of having the sufficient experts and sufficient experts at covering the tasks. And this has to do two components. One is to increase the number of experts, and this is something that will be discussed later. And the other one, it could be also to do some streamlining and efficient uses of approaches. For instance, some of the ideas already discussed was to have the experts covering different areas, but of course this will need the experts to pass the exams. And just a note here that there are some positive expectations, because the fact that more parties will prepare their submissions means that more teams in those parties are engaged in that. Maybe we have more expertise that. Finally, the simplified reviews is the fourth element, and this is very specific for developed countries and for GHG inventories. And so this is the procedures, the approaches for the reviews of completeness and consistency of the MPGs that will be developed for the GHG inventories for developed countries in between BTRs, like 2025, 2027. And this is something that will be done by be taken on board by the Secretariat, and this will be a contribution for the next review cycle. And finally, on the last element is some parties may wish to submit the information on the BTR or inventories, NIRs, earlier than the last day, and then we may need to be prepared for the review of those parties, and in some cases some of the review tools may still not be available, but in any case will be an experience that we'll have experience, we'll gain experiences from that exercise, and then we'll proceed. So I think covered the elements. I can maybe Ruta, you can take over from that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vitor. My name is Ruta Bubniene. I'm a team lead for BR and C unit at the Transparency Division, largely dealing with developed country parties, BRs and NCs, as well as supporting the work of Transparency Division in moving towards ETF. So I would seek to answer two questions. One would be about Yes, thank you, Karen. Yeah, we don't need that anymore. So, one would be related to what Vitor was saying about the need for additional experts, but the question is how many? Before going there, I would like first to share with you encouraging news that those experts that are involved in our review system now are really engaging, and that has been demonstrated during those past years of pandemic when we had conducted all reviews virtually. And in those 2 years of greenhouse gas, BRs and BURs reviews, we really received a lot of support from experts and very little decline of invitations. So that news is very encouraging. Yet, if we would like to go further for the ETF, the number that we have now would not be enough. So now we have roughly about 600 reviewers involved every 2 years in supporting MRV reviews. The challenge here of getting involved more reviewers is that although we do have quite a number of experts nominated to the roster of experts, not all experts have used the opportunity to take training in the reviews, and thus they are not qualified to participate. And also, life is life, and many experts do have competing priorities and may not participate in the review, although invited multiple times. So to answer the question, if we do need more experts, is yes, we do. And yes, we are working on that. You heard already from Shuhong talking about the preparation of training for ETF for experts, where we involve CGE and lead reviewers in that work. And we also continue delivering the trainings for existing reviews, existing MRV system. So all in all, looking into our analysis, we see that if we would like to meet the mandated requirements for the team composition in terms of geographical balance, gender balance, qualifications, then we would need about twice as many reviewers, qualified reviewers, by 2030 compared to what we do have now. And to answer further the question, then we have 3 asks for you. So one would be for the parties to nominate experts that you feel can contribute to the process, and to remind you and to remind the experts that it's not for the sake of the review, it's for the sake of your own capacity and career development, and to bringing back those experiences then to your respective country. The second ask would be for the experts, so those who are nominated and who will be nominated, just take courage and take those trainings. They might look complex, but they are really, they will be, and they are very user-friendly and also funny, so you will have a good time taking those trainings. Trust me, I did that twice. So. And then the last ask would be for those experienced experts who are in the system now to continue supporting that process, so that new experts can build on your experience and expertise, and that we do contain the system memory in that regard. And then the next question that I would like to dwell into is how do we link the 2 parallel systems of technical review under transparency and technical review of Article 6? We all are aware that the negotiations are still ongoing, and that answers to some of the questions might be received even during this session or at the end of the year by the latest. But let me recall that in Katowice, the very detailed procedures for technical expert review under transparency has been adopted with very tight deadlines prescribed in terms of weeks. That creates quite a challenge for entire system to deliver. As you know, we would need to review about 200 parties in 2 years within that strict timelines. So there are very little opportunities to maneuver between those timelines. However, we have a good news that we do have experience from the previous MRV, and we will build on that experience in terms of streamlining the process and using the tools. Yet, where the linkage comes in with Article 6, you may recall that in Glasgow, CMA agreed on that the Article 6 review process will provide input to the transparency review. So there are two questions around this notion. One is when, and the other is how. From practical perspective, the best point of entry of those inputs or the review report from Article 6 would be during or before the review week of the transparency reviewers, so that transparency reviewers can conclude on how party is tracking progress towards its NDC. If this is the case, then that would mean that very tight timelines would be set for Article 6 review. And then the other question is on how a transparency team would consider that input from Article 6. Either they would do purely mathematics or arithmetics, or they would go further than that with understanding that no duplication should be done here, so no information should be reviewed twice. So I'm sure that the Article 6 negotiators would come up with more clarity on those matters. With this, I would like to thank you for your attention and give the floor to Tugba.
Thank you very much, Rita, and welcome everyone. So yeah, without further ado, I'm not sure if we have enough time still. So first of all, thank you, and my name is Tuğba İçmeli. I'm the team lead of the CG ETF support unit. So as the name says, we are supporting the CGE, which is a constituted body actually to support developing countries in enhancing their technical capacities to implement the MRV and also the ETF. But in addition to that, of course, we are also holding complementary activities to support countries, developing countries in developing their technical capacities. And how do we do that? Oh, thank you, Karen. So actually, first of all, we always try to plan and strategize according to the needs and gaps of the developing countries in implementing MRV and ETF. So also, as I just said, we are supporting the CGE, and in line with that, we developed a kind of strategy for ourselves as a way forward for the next. It was 6 years, but now it is now for the next 4 to 5 years. So, for example, we already started over the last 2 years to introduce the enhanced transparency framework and also to introduce the MPGs to implement the ETF. But that needs to be now somehow transformed into fully implementing the ETF, because actually the BTRs, for example, is due by the end of 2024. But when you consider the preparation and all the other related tasks to prepare the BTRs, it is really the best time to start getting ready, to start preparing these reports, for example. So for that, actually, the next 2 years, and even actually we started now, the focus is now more shifting to implementing the ETF. And when I say that, okay, we already introduced the ETF, we are introducing the MPGs, but of course you know better than me, through the Glasgow actually, now we have more clarity in operationalizing the ETF. And now there are also these tools, my colleagues already just indicated, there are reporting tools, other systems and tools are under development. So we will be using the next 2 years to introduce these specific details, to also introduce what exactly to be reported in BTRs, for example, in different topics. Because, for instance, NDC tracking is a new topic, a new theme for almost all countries. So we are focusing on that. We will be focusing on that. But that's not only it. So we will be also focusing, diving more deeply into reporting on how adaptation information can be reported, how that information or data can be collected, managed, and also how to address preparation of other teams under the ETF, including FTC, including adaptation, including mitigation assessments, and all other matters. But of course, after 2024, which we expect actually, hopefully all countries will be able to send a BTR, and then we will be in a better position to see the areas of improvement, because we know that the MPGs provide some flexibilities. And of course, we acknowledge that for the developing countries, that is highly appreciated. And then the parties, while preparing these reports, for example, they will have a better idea on to see the areas of their improvement, the areas of where they need to further develop their capacities or their systems. So the other segment, we will be also building on these areas and trying to provide more technical assistance on how to enhance these technical capacities, also to address those gaps and needs. But of course, throughout the whole segments are one of the main areas we are also trying to arrange is that to collect, for instance, lessons learned, or to collect and compile some best practices, because there is already very good experience among some countries, and they can provide real good insights and some examples and some experience for other countries. We all know that every country is at a different starting point, but we also think that there might be a great opportunity for peer learning among these good practices and lessons learned. So in the next slide, actually, and the other slide, I also try to provide some of the capacity building activities we are implementing, and also some of the technical training materials there is already online. For example, if we look into the capacity building events, what we are doing is, what we are planning is to organize some ETF dialogues. Because as our director already mentioned in the opening remarks, so ETF is not only preparation of the reports, it is more than that. It is establishing the right institutional arrangements to feed into policy design and policy decision-making processes, for example, or many other stuff to make really data science-based decisions at the national level, to reach more financial resources, to make that data available to a wider stakeholder, because these are all will be complementing at the end in enhancing the capacity to address, to fully implement the enhanced transparency framework over the years. So for that, actually, we thought maybe organizing this ETF dialogues to inject in some kind of importance on how these elements will fit together, how these elements can be promoted among the countries. We can use this kind of platforms. And we are also, of course, with the CG and also with the Secretariat's other resources, we are also organizing several regional training workshops, webinars, in-person workshops, online virtual workshops as well, because over the last 2 years, actually, due to this COVID, we couldn't have the chance to go into in-person events. But with this year, we are now fully going in person, hopefully, if no problem comes forward. But also one more important point. So when we are talking about ETF, it is actually a very cross-cutting component of the Paris Agreement, but it touches upon like the mitigation assessment, adaptation reporting, the FDC information gathering, and many other things. So, and we know that actually there's a huge need to touch upon all these themes. So, for instance, this year we are starting with organizing events on how to track NDCs, how to track progress on NDCs, and how to collect and compile that information, for example. And the next years, the teams will change, of course, based on the feedback we get from the parties through these regional events, of course. And on top of that, we are also, for instance, compiling capacity building needs assessment. We are also conducting capacity building needs assessment, and we are using the outcomes, the results of that to design and to deliver these programs. But these are, as I just mentioned, regional events. On top of that, as we are aware, every country is at a different level. We are also offering on-demand in-country support. So if a country just sends us an email, just calls us, and they tells us that they need some kind of capacity building development on some specific particular area, we are also open to offer that, and actually we also already held such events in person or online, so please feel free to reach us at any moment. And in the last slide, actually, I maybe also very quickly touch upon these, because through the CGE and with other means as well, we already prepared lots of technical materials and tools. For example, you can find a tool to conduct a rapid assessment if your country is ready to implement the ETF. That might help you to prepare a plan for improvement, or to plan to find the needs and how to address those needs through a development plan, for example, an implementation plan. And also we have a technical handbook on ETF, which might be very helpful. And on top of that, of course, we have many other online training materials on different teams, as well as technical tools, even on, for instance, stakeholder engagement assessment and developing an engagement plan. So with that, actually, maybe I can just pass the floor to my colleague Federico. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Federico Brocchieri. I'm an Associate Program Officer in the ETF Coordination Unit in the Transparency Division, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to briefly touch upon another important element for a smooth and successful transition towards the new regime. That is in the acknowledgement that not only parties, but everyone has an important role to play in ensuring the success of the ETF and the Paris Agreement. It is under this spirit that the Secretariat launched a couple of years ago the Universal Participation in the ETF initiative, which aims to bring together all countries, support organization, the private sector, non-governmental organization, and any other interested stakeholder who may wish to contribute realizing the benefits of the ETF under a broader banner. The ultimate objectives or the initiatives are that all such actors realize the importance and benefits of transparency. As our director mentioned earlier, these go way beyond the simple fulfillment of reporting obligations and touch upon a number of benefits, including the opportunity of better informing policy planning at the domestic level, evidence-based results which can contribute attracting support, and ultimately contributing to an environment of trust in the process. And of course, this was launched a couple of years ago, and following the successful conclusion of the ETF-related negotiations in Glasgow, the initiative is now being revamped, so you can definitely expect to hear more from the Secretariat in the coming months about the next steps. The next slide, please. In this regard, you may wish to take note of some of the upcoming events that were also partly mentioned by my colleague Tukba, which include the regional climate weeks, which constitute collaborative platforms for governments and a diverse range of stakeholders to sit and discuss about synergies that can be established to addressing climate change. And of course, the ETF dialogues, which constitute specific events aimed at leveraging political momentum and buy-in on the importance of transparency in a broader way. So these are just some of the events which will contribute, reinforcing the narrative that it is really important to promote the need for universal participation under the ETF and engagement of as many actors as possible. So the next slide, please. Ultimately, one announcement that we are glad to make today is the release of the updated version of the ETF reference manual, which you may recall had been published a couple of years ago. We have been working over the past few months to update the manual with the latest developments from the Glasgow COP26 and as well as other recent developments. Of course, the main purpose of the manual is providing, on the one hand, a key explanation of what are the requirements introduced under the system. But it is not only for the benefit of parties, it is also for the benefit of any other interested stakeholder in getting more familiar with this process and understanding where opportunities for collaboration might be even in the future. The website can be downloaded through this QR code, but we will also be making sure that it is also available alongside the presentation on our website. And so in conclusion, perhaps what I would say is that following the successful outcome of the ETF negotiations in Glasgow, again, I think the sense is that we feel the real need to move towards concrete implementation of this system. This is, of course, an effort that we require contributions from a diverse range of actors, not only parties, and for this reason it is essential that we manage to gather as many actors as possible towards this process. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention, and I hand the floor back to Karin. Thanks.
Thank you, Federico. And that brings our updates to a close. Before we turn to any questions or comments from the audience, I'd like to note that there is additionally a wealth of information available on our updated website as well, which is at UNFCCC.int transparency. And as well, for those of you who may not yet be members, if you would like to follow along with all the updates on transparency-related discussions, please do feel free to join our LinkedIn community. We are at UN Climate Change Transparency. That is the group, and the link is there on the screen as well. And finally, if you'd like to reach out to us with any specific issues or questions or comments, please feel free to email us at etf@UNFCCC.int. And finally, just to reiterate that the PowerPoint presentation that you saw today, which contained a lot of information, will be available on the Transparency website at the top of the screen. I'd like now to open the floor to any questions, and please feel free to address them to any one of the presenters today. Thank you. Thank you. We have a question here in the third row. There is a mic that is coming to you.
Thank you very much. Alan Ramirez, Technical Director for the National Council for Climate Change of the Dominican Republic. I was pleased to hear from our last speaker on the possibility of using those regional events to further emphasize and promote the things we're doing, the ETF and so on. We are hosting the next regional Latin American Caribbean Climate Week in Dominican Republic on July, as was shown in the screen. And I was wondering what kind of interaction we could have in given the time frame that we have, so that we could have a presentation like this or some sort of collaboration or panel to discuss on these matters.
Thank you very much for the question, and perhaps I can elaborate a bit on that because I am on the Regional Climate Week Coordinating Committee on behalf of the Transparency Division. So we are, in fact, planning a number of transparency-related events. We are part of the Track 1 Focus, which will focus the programming around how to reach a 1.5 degree future. The events include a wide range of activities that span from mitigation and Article 6 related activities, as well as the national benefits of transparency in helping to realize the goals of the Paris Agreement. We are planning some high-level track programming that we will be happy to reach out and collaborate with you, and we will be looking to engage with a number of other partner organizations as well to develop a program that speaks to the kind of content that we had only a brief opportunity to discuss here today. So perhaps if you'd like to reach out, we can collaborate further offline. Thank you very much. Yes.
It's working now. Thank you. So in addition to what Karen just now mentioned, I would also like to let you know that the BUR technical analysis will also be conducted in parallel with the Regional Climate Week in the Dominican Republic. So this is really to bring the experience closer to the region, because we foresee a large number of participants will be coming to this Regional Climate Week from the region. So they will have an opportunity to really talk to the experts there conducting the BUR analysis, which is really like a prototype for the Etf reviews for developing country parties. So that's a great opportunity. Please encourage your colleagues, if they come to the Regional Climate Week, that's a good opportunity to see in practice how the future Etf review will look like. Thank you.
Any further questions, comments, views you'd like to share? I see a hand at the back.
Yes, thank you. My name is Martijn Verdonk from the Netherlands. I'm one of the persons who actually makes the reporting under the UNFCCC. Thank you for the excellent presentation and the extensive update. Lots of work, very impressive. I have two questions. One, well, perhaps a bit technical. I'm sorry, I'm a reporting guy, so I want to know what's behind the numbers you've shown us. You presented a slide with the need for review experts, and I was wondering why that need is almost doubled in 2030 compared to the previous year. So maybe I missed something, some kind of report at the end of this period, but maybe you could elaborate on that. And my second question is with regard to the reference manuals. Very keen to look into to those, but I was wondering, considering, well, not all details are fleshed out with regard to reporting and reviewing guidelines. Can we also expect manuals of guidance on those? And what are the plans from your side on that? And with the expectation that it meets all the timelines for reporting and reviewing. So thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. On the first question regarding the number of experts and why there is a significant increase in 2030, I'll turn to Ruta to provide a bit of background on that estimate. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. And we are happy to look into that. We worked on a number of assumptions because the future is uncertain, and one of our assumptions on which we based this with graph and calculation was that although we hope that all parties will submit their BTR by end of 24, looking into the current practice, it looks like it would be quite uncertain that we would receive 195 submissions by the end of 24. So the number of reviewers would also increase with time, and we assumed that by that time, 2030, all parties will submit, and we would have the system up and running in full scale and full speed. So again, that number is very rough number. We took the minimum, maximum, and best estimate. There is quite a number of uncertainties on how the teams would be composed and how many experts we would need. Would expert, for example, participate in the process only once in the review cycle, or would expert participate once a year or 3 times a year? Then depending on the frequency of participation, maybe less experts would be needed. So we were drawing on quite a number of assumptions, and we'll be happy to share them with you if you would be keen to know more about it. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. And perhaps to speak briefly to what I understand the second question is, which is about whether there will be additional guidance or future guidance on how to interpret the ETF. So the manual that we have just released is an updated version from the original version, which was released in 2020. And this was updated to take into consideration the outcomes that we achieved in Glasgow. So it reflects the decisions 5 CMA 3, for example, and all of the CTF tables that were agreed at that same point. There are, to develop additional guidance in terms of reporting, every country is in a bit of a unique situation in starting and coming from different starting points. So the development of reporting guidance is not something that we necessarily emphasize, but we do provide materials such as the reference manual to help understand what the guidance is. In addition to that, we have a number of communities, and I'll turn to Vitor, and then, or first to Tuba, okay, and then to Vitor to speak a little bit about the role of our lead reviewers in developing additional guidance in following and in particular in reviewing information, such as the review practice guidance. First, I'll turn to Tuba. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Karen. Actually, this was a great question because we are also trying to help or assess the countries in the best way possible we can. And in doing that, we know that actually the needs, the things to do is at a great extent, and we are also collaborating with many international organizations and other partners as well to match this need. And this is actually, we are planning actually we already started thinking to develop some basic technical manuals, at least because now we have the common reporting tables and formats. So now we are going to start with the CG ETF unit and as the transparency division actually to also provide some kind of guidance, not like as Karen really put it very straightforward. So every country has a different NDC, a different situation, different circumstances, but we are planning to compile, for example, some best practices, some good examples, as well as we are also produce some basic manuals, handbooks to guide with some examples on how to fill in these tables, for example. So that's something we are now working on. and we are planning to make them available later this year, or latest by the next year actually as well. And we also have this additional handbook on ETF, so that also provides some information on the whole process. But in addition to that, we also have an institutional arrangements handbook, because this is also an important component to consider, because that would be the main foundation for implementing the ETF. There are some kind of common areas that countries can consider while developing their institutional arrangements. So I think that's also an important aspect of implementation. Thank you. Over to you, Victor.
Thank you, Tukba. So I will turn now for the review part, and the review part is more specific for those that are conducting the reviews. Currently, we have, under the MRV processes, we have also guidance. We have the RPGs, the review practice guidance for NCBRs, and then we have the review handbook for GAG inventories. They have maybe a different scope because of the inventories are more technical, but the plans that we're doing is to also have those guidance for the reviews, for the conjoint reviews of the BTRs and also of the NAR, and this will be available to the experts that will participate in the reviews. So another incentive to participate in the reviews. And the second thing, last thing I would like to mention is about there's also the lead reviews meeting, and the lead reviews meeting for the GAG for NCBR has also been conducting for many years, and they have the conclusions and recommendations, and they're publicly available on the website, and they also provide guidance. And the lead reviews meeting under the ETF, that's starting as now as well. And so they will probably provide that guidance as well. And that will be publicly available probably. And probably they will take in consideration the guidance, the range of guidance that we have today.
And in addition to what Vitor was talking about, in terms of the review guidance, one most immediate documents is the Etf Training Materials that just earlier I mentioned about. This is the mandate from Glasgow that Secretariat is developing under the guidance of lead reviewers and CGE members, this new Etf Training Materials for review experts. And there, in that training materials, there are specific guidance on how to review under the ETF. Review the reporting requirements, reporting provisions, when parties, provide their reports.
Thank you. Any further questions? Don't be shy. Anything you'd like to understand, or any comments or clarifications you'd like to seek from the presenters, please don't be shy to ask. Okay, I do have a question there. Harry, thank you.
Thank you. A more technical question, I assume, for Vlad. I was in contact with our IT people of the National Emission Registration in the Netherlands that has an integrated database of all types of emissions, and they really have to figure out how it moves in the future into the new software. Are you planning to have multiple options to import? Or you say, no, we restrict ourselves to HTML and nothing else? Or is it something, if it comes forward during your testing, that it still can change? Because that is a really critical element for example, the Netherlands, to estimate or cost how to change our system. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. I was thinking that I won't escape. So Indeed, we are in the process of discussing all these requirements. And again, the mandate from the parties is to make sure that the system is created in a way to be interoperable with the IPCC software. This doesn't mean that we are not looking also at the countries that are advanced with their national systems of emissions and looking at their possibilities to import data into the reporting tools. Of course, we will be discussing this with the respective countries at the respective time, when the time will come to develop the tools or to be so advanced to consider that. But I'm pretty sure that there will be options that will be allowed for parties to be able to import their data in the let's say the ways that is advanced at this time in the IT world. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have a question here in the front. Okay. Would that be all right if we start with a question there, and we will pass the mic up to you in the front afterward. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thanks. I'm Buddhika from Sri Lanka. And just two questions from my side. As I understand, some countries are already using online tools, right, for the GHG inventory and also tracking NDCs. So the first question is, are you going to sort of like take a stock of those existing tools, not only from the countries? There are some institutions also who have developed, which have been given to the certain countries. So the first thing is that whether you are going to take a stock of those existing tools and to see actually how the new tools can be compatible with those existing ones. The second question is, in future, when you are going to use the reporting tools, how are you going to connect with the existing country-specific online tools? Through APIs, or are you going to issue APIs? Or do you allow countries to issue APIs? And this just to see how it can be connected. Thanks.
Yeah. Can I? Okay. So thank you, Budika, for the questions. The way the tools are being prepared now, again, as I mentioned, we are looking at the way to make these tools simple. At the same time, the new tools won't be able to fit all the different online tools that are now in the world. That should be very clear. We won't probably find the easiest way to connect with all the tools that were developed by different countries in the world. We will make sure that the exporting, importing of data, which is the most important and relevant aspect of getting the data into our reporting tools, that again the exporting and importing will be something that is simple and that it follows the easiest and most common ways to do this process, like different types of IT procedures that are in place now in the world to make sure that this is happening. So I think I responded to both of the questions. It is one of our goals to make sure that there is a simple way of parties to import and export their data into our tools. And again, we will be looking at options to make sure that this is possible in a simple manner.
Thank you, Vlad. And one question, I think this is our final question, so thank you very much. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Camila from Brazil. Regarding the IT architecture, I'm curious, you said that you are in the process of selecting the implementation vendors. So I'd like to hear more, if you could comment, and also the cloud services to back up all this such a strategic and humongous amount of information for the next 20 years. Who knows?
Thank you for the question. Indeed, we are at this stage. We are not yet there at that stage. So we are at the stage in which we are trying to, again, to make it simple. For us to make it, to have a, let's say, an easier life in the coming future, we need to make sure that the business requirements are transformed into system requirements that any IT person in the world can read. And that's why it's taking a bit more time than what we were expecting. Again, you have to think that we have all these tables and all the requirements in the decision that needs to be presented in a way for an IT person that has no clue about what ETF means to be able to read. So this is what is happening at this moment. At the same time, we are starting to look on the next phase of this project, which is again selecting the vendors. So we need first to put in place all these system requirements, or at least an important part of it, so that we can start. Further on, we can add different specifications for the system requirements. But this is the process that will be coming in the next months in terms of selecting the vendors, looking at the best option also for the cloud, and for as you have mentioned, finding the best way for this architecture that I showed you to really work in terms of the technical requirements.
Thank you, Vlad. And unfortunately, that brings our time to a close. But if you do have any further questions and would like to reach out to us, please do reach us at the email address there on the screen. Thank you very much for joining us today, either in person or online. And we look forward to hearing and working with you over the coming years. Thank you very much.